This review video is going to focus on Greece. The learning targets are not provided in this video for this unit because it was a very lengthy unit. So if you want to go back and look at them, please go back and look at your notes online to see the various learning targets that go with this unit. But the focus of this unit is Greece, and this is our unit 4, part 1 and 2. On the screen, you see a map of Greece. So just to make sure we know where we are in the world, know that the peninsula here, Greece, is sticking out into the Mediterranean Sea. Greece is the white area. To the west, or to the right, is the Italian peninsula. So we remember this because Greece is right of Rome. To the east here, we have the Persian Empire, which will become important a little later on in the video. Point out some important places on here. We got two major city-states. One is Athens, here along the coast, and another is Sparta, which is actually here. It's not located on this particular map. Also notice some important bodies of water, the Aegean Sea, the Mediterranean Sea, and the Ionian Sea, and also the Dardanelles Straits that connected the Black Sea to the Aegean Sea and ultimately to the Mediterranean Sea. Notice that on this map, you can see a bunch of triangles all over Greece. Why do you think these are here? Well, hopefully you remember from earlier in the year that it's because Greece is covered in mountains, and we'll look at that in just a second. Also notice Greece is made up of two peninsulas. One is the Peloponnesian Peninsula, the smaller area that included Sparta and here, and the second is the Balkan Peninsula, which is really all of Greece. So as we just mentioned, Greece was dominated by mountains. It was a very mountainous peninsula. You can also see they had some islands that were also mountainous on the map off to the side. This is going to provide some positives and negatives. The main positive of the mountains is it provided defense. It made it hard for people to attack, and this is going to become important for the Greeks later on. Negatives of the mountains, though, is it meant they had very little farmland. This is going to mean there's not going to be a lot of living space because we learned in previous videos and lessons and units that you have to have farming space in order to survive. In addition, it's going to be very hard to travel and communicate. It's hard to get over the mountains, and you can't pick up cell phones or send emails, so communication's difficult. This means that the city-states of Greece are not going to be able to unify politically, at least not easily, because they can't talk with each other, and you can't effectively unite if you can't communicate. They're also going to lack some resources. This lack of resources is going to force them to go out and get colonies, take over other places in order to get more farming space and resources. So because of these mountains, the Greeks have to form city-states. Again, city-states are areas that have similar culture but different governments. They're not united. The two major city-states you need to know about are Athens and Sparta. We'll go over their differences in a second, but let's first look at their similarities. Remember, their major similarities are going to be in culture. So both of them are going to practice Greek mythology. This is the religion of the Greeks. It provides an explanation for natural phenomena, kind of why things happen, provide a history, but it doesn't provide guidance on what's right and wrong, making it very different from religions like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. It's also a polytheistic religion because it has many gods, some of the important ones being Zeus, Hera, and Apollo. In addition, both of these city-states are going to start off as monarchies. Monarchies are ruled by kings and queens. We'll take a look at this more in a second, but know that even though they're both going to get different governments and be separate, they are both going to be monarchies. Monarchies are eventually going to be replaced by aristocracies. Aristocracy is when the people with money have the power. To help you out a little bit on this government before we go much further, there are four major types of government we talked about in this unit. We just talked about monarchies, state ruled by king, heredity based. Okay? There's also aristocracies where the nobility rules, also heredity based, but it's a very social status government. You also have an oligarchy where a very small group of citizens rule and normally control the military. And then of course you have democracy, maybe one of the most important types of government and the types of government we have here, where the state and the government is ruled by citizens and rule is based on citizenship. And the idea of majority rule is important. Whoever has the most votes wins. This is developed in Athens, and we kind of know that Athens is maybe the cradle of where these democratic ideas start. We'll talk more about these as we move through the video. So Athens and Sparta are two major civilizations. Let's take a look at some differences between them. Sparta's landlocked. If we went back to that map, you saw it's right in the middle of all the triangles. Landlocked means they can't get to the water easily. That means they're not going to be able to trade very well. Meanwhile, Athens has access to the sea, so they're going to be able to trade, most specifically the Aegean Sea. Sparta, because they're on land, is going to have a very strong army, while Athens is going to have a strong navy because they can get to the sea. In fact, Sparta had such a strong army, that's all they really cared about. All they did was focus on military training. It was a very stringent training that started at the age of 7. very violent, and every Spartan male was required to serve in the military. Athens, on the other hand, had more of a focus on culture and government. So they had more developments that we'll talk more about later. In addition, they also had a rule of tyrants. Tyrants like Draco and Solon helped the poor and are going to eventually lead us to democracy. In terms of government, Sparta has an oligarchy. Oligarchy is again, from the last slide, is when you have a very small group of rich people ruling, and it's very militaristic in nature. Athens, on the other hand, develops a democracy. Again, ruled by the people, citizens, and we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. These are some very important things to know, the differences between these two, so please make sure you understand these before you take the test. So we said before that Athens and Sparta don't unify. In fact, they're competitors. But at one point, they're forced to unify, and that's when the Persians want to expand into Greece. Persians were the empire next door that we talked about from Unit 3, and empires always want to expand, and eventually that expansion reaches Greece. So again, this war is going to be between Persia and Greece, but it's actually going to be between Persia and Athens and Sparta. They're actually going to work together. That's not something they're used to doing. In fact, this is the first time they work together. Reason the Persian War happened, Persia was an empire and they wanted to expand, and eventually the Greeks are going to resist that expansion at the Battle of Marathon, making the Persians very mad and fueling their revenge. There's a couple of major battles from this war. The first, the Battle of Marathon, where the Ionian Greeks rebelled against the Persians, were helped by the Athenians. The Persians win this war, but they're so angry that the Greeks dare go against them that they seek revenge, and it really leads to the rest of the war. The Battle of Marathon is the famous Battle of 300, where 300 Spartans were defeated by the Persians at the Thermopylae Pass, a narrow mountain pass, but they inflicted so much damage on the Persians, it's going to be a major turning point in the war. Battle of Salamis is a water battle, so Athens led this one. Sparta led the Thermopylae battle. Battle of Salamis, similar idea, led the Persian navy into a very narrow passageway and then used their boats to ram them. And the Battle of Plataea is when Athens and Sparta work together and kick out the Persians. So the outcomes, Greece is going to defeat Persia, pretty significant. It's also the first time Athens and Sparta work together, a slight unification. It's also going to lead to the formation of alliances. Athens is going to run the Delian League, but they're not going to let Sparta be a part of it. They want to be the most powerful. Remember, Athens and Sparta work together, but they're also competitors. The Spartans are going to form the Peloponnesian League. Eventually, these two alliances are going to come in contact with each other. Remember, an alliance is when you have two groups that have each other's back. So if one alliance member attacks somebody from another alliance, all of their friends are going to attack them back. Hopefully you can see this eventually is going to pull both city-states and all of Greece into war. But before that war, Athens experiences a golden age. Notice I said Athens, not Athens and Sparta. Golden ages are times of peace, prosperity, and wealth and contributions. We talked about this before. Sparta doesn't have one, though, because Sparta only cares about military. So they didn't have the right structure to have a golden age. So Athens has the golden age. The golden age is led by a guy named Pericles in Athens. He had three main goals. The first, he wanted to strengthen Athenian democracy. He wanted to make it more direct. He wanted people to have even more of a say. Now, when we say people, unfortunately, we don't mean women and slaves, only men. But he wanted to have as many men as possible have a direct role in government, meaning every single man voted on every single thing, not through representatives. He also wanted to increase the size of the navy. This is to make sure the Persians aren't going to attack back and take over after the defeat in the Persian Wars. And again, they had a strong navy anyways. He wanted to make it even better. And finally, he wanted to rebuild Athens to its former glory, which included building the structure at the bottom of the screen, known as the Parthenon. Okay, this was to commemorate the Battle of Marathon. Way to remember that this is the Parthenon is the word Parthenon has an R in the middle, just like the word Greece has an R in the middle, because it kind of looks like a structure in Rome as well. So, who's not going to be happy about this golden age? Well, Sparta's not going to be very happy, but we'll get to that in a moment. On the screen now is just a list of contributors that you need to know about. These are just people you need to be able to identify on a test. So we have two mathematicians, Pythagoras and Euclid. Pythagoras came up with the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And Euclid worked with geometry, particularly writing a book named The Elements. Hippocrates was a doctor, a medicine person. He came up with the idea of symptoms to find out when people are sick, and the Hippocratic Oath, an oath that doctors to this day still take to show that they are looking out for the best interests of the patient. Archimedes was a scientist who came up with the value of pi and also created simple machines like pulleys and levers. We talked about Homer already. He wrote mythology, particularly the Iliad and the Odyssey. They recorded the mythology for the Greeks. They also came up, the Greeks, with plays and dramas, more specifically comedies and tragedies. Two big ones to remember are Aeschylus and Sophocles. There are also two major historians during the Greek time period. One was Herodotus. He was an inaccurate historian, but also the first historian, so he's still important, who wrote a book about the Persian Wars. He was very dramatic. It wasn't very accurate. Thucydides was much more accurate. He interviewed people. He got the evidence before he wrote, and he wrote about the Peloponnesian War, which we'll look at in a few minutes. And finally, Theodotus is an artist, more specifically a sculptor, who's going to create a statue of Zeus and also a statue of Athena, two Greek gods. So again, all of this positive stuff is happening in Athens. And we know that Athens is always in competition with Sparta. So eventually Sparta is going to get really mad about the success of Athens. And what does Sparta have really good? An army. So what are they going to do? Attack Athens because they're jealous. Okay. Before we get to that, two real quick things to remember. Remember, this is the Parthenon on the left. And on the right, we have three columns. Just be able to identify these on a test: Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. The last three contributors that you need to know about are the philosophers. Again, as we mentioned before, philosophers are kind of people that come up with theories on how things should work. But in Greece, they're a little different. They're actually the world's first teachers. Okay, the first three philosophers are Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Best way to remember this, and the order is SPA, S-P-A. Socrates is going to come up with an idea called the Socratic method. This was learning through questioning. It's kind of what your teachers do. He's ultimately going to be killed, though, for corrupting the youth of Athens. The government didn't like that he was getting people to question them. Next up is Plato. He was more learning through discussion. Let's talk about it. He's going to open a school called an academy, and he's going to write a book called The Republic that gives his ideas on government. And finally, the last is going to be Aristotle. Aristotle was more of a learn-your-own-way type. Just kind of use whatever learning style works best for you. He also is going to open up a school called the Lyceum, and he is going to teach Alexander the Great, which is going to become much more important after the Peloponnesian Wars, which is what we're going to take a look at next. So again, all these golden age things are happening in Athens. So their major competitor is going to get jealous, and the major competitor, of course, is Sparta. Now, Sparta was really good at fighting on the land. They were really, really powerful military. That's all they cared about. So ultimately, they are going to attack Athens. But remember, it's not just Athens versus Sparta. It's also the alliances. So the Peloponnesian Wars is Athens versus Sparta. But again, it's also the Delian League led by Athens versus the Peloponnesian League led by Sparta. So really, this war is all of Greece. So why did it happen? Sparta was jealous of Athens' golden age and their success, and they wanted some too. So major events. Sparta's going to attack Athens with that powerful military. Athens, though, doesn't want to fight them. They would not fight them on the land. They wanted to fight them on the sea, where they had the powerful navy. So they kept retreating to the city, pulling more and more people into the city away, kind of delaying fighting the Spartans. It's going to backfire, though, because a plague is ultimately going to hit Athens. A plague is a sickness. It's going to kill many people, including Pericles. This is going to leave Athens without their major leader. Remember Pericles with all those goals and ideas about democracy. Make sure you go back and read his funeral oration for the early part of the Peloponnesian Wars, as it gives some good ideas about the direct democracy he wanted. But without his leadership, Sparta's going to win the war. This is going to lead Athens to lose power, but really it's going to leave all of Greece very, very weak and vulnerable. Why is that going to happen? Because it wasn't just Athens versus Sparta. All of Greece was fighting. They were weak. They also weren't paying attention to their borders. And who's going to take advantage of that? The Macedonians and Alexander the Great. So Philip II of Macedonia is actually going to be the one that takes over. And notice Macedonia is to the north of Greece. He's going to take advantage of the very weakened Greeks, and he's going to attack. He's going to take over Greece, and when he dies, he's replaced by his son, Alexander the Great. Remember, who was taught by a Greek, Aristotle. So that backfired a little bit. He's going to defeat the Egyptians and the Persians to create an empire. Fortunately, the empire is only going to last for 11 years after he died, and his empire is going to be divided between the pharaoh, a Persian leader, a Greek leader, and a Macedonian leader. So it kind of all goes back to where it was to begin with. So it's a very shortly lived empire, but very powerful. If you look at the map down here, it looks a lot like the Persian Empire, with one major difference. The Persians lost the Persian Wars, so they never got Greece. Alexander did. Now, despite the short-lived empire, Alexander's empire was very influential in creating culture. What happened is every time Alexander took over an area, he would mix the culture together with the cultures he had already taken over. So when he took over Persia, he mixed it with Greek culture. Then he would take over Egypt and mix the Egyptian culture with the Greek culture and the Persian culture. This is going to create a new culture called Hellenistic culture. So Alexander's main legacy of the creation is the creation of Hellenistic culture. It was a mixture of Persian, Greek, and Egyptian culture, the three areas he took over. We call this cultural diffusion, when you take cultures and mix them together. You're diffusing them together to create a new culture, Hellenistic culture. He's going to spread it throughout his empire, and it's going to be a very influential culture until the Roman Empire is established. One of the most important cities he's going to create is Alexandria in Egypt, which eventually will rival Athens as a center of knowledge within the empire, particularly, of course, Hellenistic culture and Hellenistic knowledge. And it's going to, again, rival Athens.